The abandonment. The desert stretched endlessly, its silence pierced only by the restless wind carrying whispers of grief. Evelyn walked slowly behind her husband, Thomas, her mind occupied not with the miles they had traveled, but with the memory of her grandmother, Martha. The story of abandonment had lived in her blood since childhood. Martha and her two young grandchildren, left behind by settlers who judged them burdens, left to starve under the merciless sun until the Navajo found them. Survival had come, but the wound of betrayal remained. Evelyn often wondered if the cruelty of abandonment was worse than death itself. Now, years later, she felt that same wound pressing invisibly against her own heart. Thomas, tall and broad-shouldered, carried supplies with the efficiency of a man who believed survival was the only virtue worth clinging to. His movements were precise, his words few. Where others might soften hardship with laughter or affection, he replaced tenderness with silence. Evelyn had once admired his steadfastness, but marriage had revealed another truth. He was a man who provided, but never nurtured. He guarded the family with strong hands, yet he never reached for her as a woman, never gave warmth beyond duty. She followed him through the canyon trail, her skirts brushing against sharp rocks, and thought of how empty her life had become. Their two children, Lila and Jonah, skipped ahead, delighting in the echoes their voices made against the cliffs. Their innocence was her only anchor, but even in her role as mother, Evelyn felt unseen. Thomas rarely praised her efforts or noticed her quiet sacrifices. Love, in its truest form, seemed absent from their home. The night they camped beneath a crescent moon, Evelyn sat apart from the fire. The children slept, and Thomas busied himself with arranging the packs for morning. She longed for conversation, for even the smallest acknowledgement of her thoughts. "Do you ever think of Martha?" she asked softly. Thomas did not look up. "That was long ago. Doesn't matter now." His answer landed with the weight of a stone. To him, the past was irrelevant, but to Evelyn, it was a mirror reflecting her present. She felt as if she, too, had been left behind, abandoned not on a desert trail, but within the cold walls of marriage where affection had withered. That night she dreamt of her grandmother's face, gaunt yet defiant, holding the children close as the settlers vanished over the horizon. Evelyn woke with tears on her cheeks and a hollow ache in her chest. The following afternoon, as they neared a stretch of land Thomas hoped to farm, Evelyn lagged behind, overwhelmed by fatigue. Her heart beat with more than physical strain. It beat with questions she dared not voice. Would her life always be this way? Was she destined to be bound to a man who saw her as necessary but not cherished? Her thoughts fractured when voices called from the ridge. Figures appeared, men of the Navajo, riding gracefully upon painted horses. Evelyn stiffened, though her children ran to her side in fascination. Thomas straightened, his face unreadable, hand resting instinctively on the knife at his belt. The leader dismounted, his presence calm, yet commanding. His gaze fell first on Thomas, then on Evelyn. Unlike her husband's distant eyes, his glance lingered with a quiet curiosity, as though he could read the loneliness she carried. "My name is Caleb," he said in measured English, his tone smooth as flowing water. "You are far from home." Thomas gave a curt nod, answering only with the essentials, but Evelyn felt her breath catch. There was something in Caleb's manner, a gentleness veiled in strength, that unsettled her. His voice carried warmth she had not heard in years, a sound that stirred something buried within. He asked about their journey, about the children, and though Thomas offered brief replies, Caleb's attention drifted back to Evelyn, acknowledging her as more than a shadow beside her husband. For the first time in so long, she felt visible. As evening fell, the Navajo invited them to share food. Evelyn sat among strangers who laughed and spoke with ease, a stark contrast to the silence that defined her own household. Caleb sat near her, never crossing boundaries yet never ignoring her presence. She found herself leaning toward him unconsciously, drawn by the gravity of his calm energy. When Thomas finally announced it was time to leave, Evelyn felt reluctant. She had spoken more words in 1 hour than in weeks beside her husband. She caught Caleb's gaze once more, and in it she saw not pity but recognition, as if he knew the weight she bore in silence. As she followed Thomas away from the circle of firelight, Evelyn's heart quickened with a realization both thrilling and terrifying. The story of Martha's abandonment had always haunted her, but tonight she discovered a deeper truth. Sometimes the cruelest abandonment was not physical but emotional. And in that moment, she sensed the beginning of something dangerous, an awakening that could shatter the fragile shell of her marriage. The encounter. The journey continued, but something had shifted in Evelyn's world since that night among the Navajo. She walked behind Thomas as before, yet her thoughts no longer followed the rhythm of his footsteps. They wandered instead toward Caleb, his voice, his composure, his gaze that seemed to linger as if he understood her without words. Evelyn tried to dismiss the memory, but it clung to her like the desert dust. She reminded herself that she was a wife and a mother, bound by vows, but her heart, long starved of tenderness, could not help but reach for the faint warmth Caleb had offered. 2 days later, Thomas's stubborn determination led them astray. Their canteens grew lighter with each mile, and the children's lips cracked beneath the unrelenting sun. When Lila stumbled, Evelyn rushed to her side, worry carving lines into her face. Thomas insisted they push forward, muttering about reaching a river he was certain lay ahead. Evelyn doubted him, but said nothing. Silence had become the safest language between them. By late afternoon, a shadow moved along the ridge above them. Evelyn's breath caught. Riders again. She recognized the paint on the horses, the proud posture of their riders. At the front was Caleb. Relief spread through her, though she concealed it beneath a calm expression. Caleb dismounted and spoke with quiet authority, offering water skins filled from a spring nearby. Thomas hesitated, pride stiffening his shoulders, but Evelyn reached first, pressing the cool leather to her daughter's lips. Gratitude welled in her chest, gratitude directed not at her husband, but at this man whose kindness asked for nothing in return. "We did not expect to see you again," Evelyn said, her voice low but steady. Caleb's eyes softened. The desert is wide, but paths often cross where they are meant to. Her cheeks warmed at his words, and she quickly looked down. Yet in that simple exchange, something stirred, something both dangerous and irresistible. Thomas muttered about wasted time and insisted they move on, but Caleb offered guidance toward a safer route. "There is a canyon ahead that will lead you to water," he said, his gaze fixed firmly on Thomas, though his meaning seemed aimed at Evelyn. After a tense pause, Thomas agreed. As they traveled together, Caleb rode at a measured pace beside the family. He asked the children questions about their games, making them laugh, their voices echoing against the rocks. Evelyn watched quietly, struck by how easily joy bloomed in his presence. Thomas rarely played with the children, his energy consumed by work and caution. Here, Evelyn saw what fatherhood could be, a role filled not only with provision but also affection. When the canyon walls rose around them, Caleb dismounted and walked beside Evelyn. The closeness unsettled her, yet she did not drift away. Instead, she felt her heart quicken at the rhythm of his footsteps alongside hers. "You carry much on your shoulders," he said softly, careful that Thomas did not hear. Evelyn glanced at him, startled. "What makes you say so?" "The eyes speak when the lips stay silent," Caleb replied. Her throat tightened. She wanted to deny it, to protect herself behind the wall she had built, but the sincerity in his tone disarmed her. "And what do my eyes say?" she whispered. "That you are not seen as you should be." The words struck deep, peeling away layers of quiet suffering. No one, not even her own husband, had acknowledged her loneliness so directly. For a fleeting moment, Evelyn felt exposed, as though Caleb could see through every guarded thought. Yet instead of shame, she felt relief. Thomas called out for her to keep pace, and the spell broke. Evelyn stepped ahead quickly, but her heart raced with a new awareness. That evening, they camped near the spring Caleb had promised. The The water shimmered in the moonlight, and the children played nearby while Thomas tended the fire. Evelyn sat apart, her gaze fixed on the rippling surface. Caleb approached, his presence calm, his movements unhurried. "Your grandmother," he said gently. "She was found by my people long ago. Her story is known." Evelyn turned sharply, surprise flashing across her face. "Do you know of Martha?" He nodded. "She was strong, though she carried sorrow in her eyes. I see the same strength in you." Her breath caught. The threads of her past and present seemed to weave together, binding her fate to this man in ways she could not yet understand. Before she could respond, Thomas rose, suspicion flickering in his expression. Caleb stepped back with respectful distance, bowing his head slightly as though nothing had passed between them. But Evelyn's heart knew otherwise. Something had been spoken without words, an understanding shared beneath the surface. When she lay down that night beside her husband, she did not sleep. Her body remained still, but her mind spun restlessly. She thought of Martha abandoned, thought of her own quiet suffering, and thought of Caleb, the man who saw her when no one else did. And as the stars wheeled above the canyon, Evelyn realized she stood on the edge of a precipice. One more step, and her life would never be the same. The betrayal. The spring had given them strength, but with strength came unrest. Evelyn moved through the following days like a woman split in two, one bound to duty, the other drawn irresistibly toward desire. Thomas remained steadfast in his silence, speaking only of routes, harvest, and tools. His practicality left no room for tenderness, and his indifference pressed heavier on her heart with each passing mile. Caleb, however, lingered in her thoughts. Even when he was not near, she felt the echo of his voice, the weight of his gaze, the memory of his words. "You're not seen as you should be." Those words had carved themselves into her soul. One evening, as the sky deepened into shades of violet, Thomas announced he would hunt for game before nightfall. He left with his rifle slung across his shoulder, his figure swallowed by the shadows of the canyon. The children played close to the fire, their laughter ringing like bells against the stone walls. Evelyn busied herself with the meal, though her hands trembled. She did not hear Caleb approach until he was beside her. He moved with the quiet assurance of one who belonged to the earth itself. He crouched near the flames, his presence steady, his voice low. "You look weary," he said, studying her face. Evelyn exhaled shakily. "There are days when weariness feels like all I am." Caleb's brow furrowed. "You are more than that." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, a current, swift and undeniable. Evelyn's pulse quickened. She wanted to step away, to create distance, yet her body betrayed her heart. She remained, rooted in place by the warmth of his nearness. The children tired quickly and soon curled up against one another, drifting into sleep. Evelyn pulled a blanket over them, then turned back to find Caleb still watching her. His gaze was not bold, but searching, as though he sought the truth she buried beneath years of silence. "Why do you stay?" he asked quietly. Her throat tightened. "Because I must. Because leaving is impossible. Or because fear binds you," he countered. Evelyn felt tears threaten. She had lived so long without acknowledgement that the mere act of being seen unraveled her defenses. She turned her face away, ashamed of the emotion that burned behind her eyes. Caleb reached out, his hand hovering just above hers before finally resting gently against her skin. The touch was soft, reverent, and yet it carried a power that left her trembling. "Evelyn," he whispered her name a prayer. Her resolve crumbled. In that moment, every lonely night, every unspoken plea for affection, every cold silence beside her husband surged forward, demanding release. She leaned into Caleb, her lips meeting his in a kiss that shattered the barriers she had built. It was not wild, but desperate, a hunger born from years of denial. When the kiss broke, she drew back, breathless, her heart pounding like a drum. "This is wrong," she murmured. "Perhaps," Caleb replied, his voice steady, "but it is also true." The truth of it terrified her. She should have pulled away entirely, should have returned to her children and waited for Thomas. But instead she lingered, drawn to Caleb's steadiness, his warmth, his quiet certainty. They spoke little after that, for words were no longer necessary. The fire between them had been kindled, and both knew it would not easily die. By the time Thomas returned, Evelyn sat beside the fire, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her face carefully composed. Caleb had retreated into the shadows, his expression unreadable, but the echo of their intimacy lingered in every beat of her heart. Thomas set down his meager catch and muttered about bad luck in hunting. He did not notice the flush in Evelyn's cheeks or the way her eyes avoided his. His silence had always blinded him, and tonight it shielded her secret. Yet, as Evelyn lay down beside him, her body stiff, her mind raced with guilt and exhilaration. She had crossed the threshold she once swore she never would. She had betrayed her vows, her husband, and perhaps even herself. And yet, in that betrayal, she had felt more alive than in all the years of her marriage. Sleep eluded her. She stared at the canyon ceiling above, her thoughts circling endlessly. She wondered if Martha had ever felt the same, torn between survival and the yearning of the heart. The thought unsettled her, for it suggested her own choices were not born of weakness, but of an unquenchable human need to be seen, to be cherished. Beside her, Thomas snored softly, oblivious. Evelyn closed her eyes, pressing her palms together as though in prayer, though no words formed. She did not know what tomorrow would bring, only that the path she had stepped on it could not be undone. And as dawn crept across the canyon, she realized she had become both the abandoned and the betrayer, caught in a fate she could neither escape nor fully embrace. The reckoning. The days that followed were heavy with silence. Evelyn carried her secret like a hidden flame, both warming and burning her from within. She moved through her duties with practiced composure, tending to the children, preparing meals, gathering water. But beneath the calm exterior, her thoughts were consumed by Caleb. Every glance, every brush of his hand against hers, replayed endlessly in her mind. Thomas noticed nothing. Or perhaps, Evelyn wondered, he chose not to. His world was built on certainty, crops to plant, fences to raise, mouths to feed. He had no language for the subtleties of longing. Yet his silence no longer felt like mere indifference. It felt like an accusation, a shadow pressing against her every breath. One evening, Martha's old tale returned to her in vivid clarity. The night her grandmother was left with 2 children to die, the betrayal that had scarred generations. Evelyn realized with a start that she, too, was repeating that legacy. Martha had been abandoned by others, but Evelyn was abandoning herself. The thought lodged in her heart like a stone. That night, after the children had fallen asleep, Caleb appeared at the edge of camp. His figure blended with the darkness, but Evelyn felt his presence before she saw him. She rose quietly, drawn as if by invisible cords, and met him a short distance away beneath the canyon wall. "We cannot keep this," she whispered, her voice breaking. Caleb's eyes held hers, and yet we cannot undo it. The honesty in his tone cut through her defenses. She wanted to deny him, to retreat into the safety of silence. But the truth was undeniable. Her heart had already chosen. Still, she thought of her children, of the vows she had once spoken, of the man who slept just steps away. "I feel alive with you," she admitted, tears stinging her eyes, "but alive in a way that shames me." Caleb stepped closer, not touching her, yet near enough that the warmth of his presence steadied her trembling. "Shame is not life. It is the chain placed on life. What we share, call it wrong if you must, but it is real. You must decide which truth you will carry." His words struck deep, and Evelyn felt herself fracture. Part of her longed to surrender fully, to escape into the arms of a man who saw her, who cherished her. Yet another part recoiled, bound to duty, to the fragile stability her children depended on. The sound of footsteps startled her. She turned sharply. Thomas stood at the edge of the firelight, his face shadowed but his posture rigid. For a moment, no one spoke. The canyon seemed to hold its breath. Evelyn's heart thundered in her chest, her secret collapsing into the open air. Thomas's voice was low, controlled. You think I do not see? You think I am blind? Evelyn's lips parted, but no words came. Caleb remained silent, his gaze fixed firmly on Thomas, not with defiance, but with quiet strength. You may not speak it, Thomas continued, his jaw clenched, but your silence tells enough. I have lost you already. Evelyn's tears spilled freely now. She wanted to protest, to soften the blow, but the truth lay bare between them. She had betrayed him, not with elaborate lies, but with her yearning, her touch, her surrender to another man. Thomas turned away, his shoulders sagging with a weight Evelyn had never seen before. He did not rage, did not strike, did not even curse. His silence, once her torment, now became her punishment. When he returned to the camp, Evelyn remained frozen beneath the canyon wall. Caleb touched her arm lightly, but she shook her head, stepping back. No, she whispered, voice ragged. This will destroy everything. He searched her eyes, then nodded with solemn understanding. Without another word, he melted into the darkness, leaving her alone with the echo of choices she could never erase. Evelyn returned to the fire, her body heavy with dread. Thomas lay with his back turned, his breathing steady but far from sleep. She curled beside the children, her arms wrapped around them as though they were her only lifeline. The night stretched endlessly, filled with the unspoken. At dawn, Evelyn rose to see the sun bleeding over the horizon, staining the desert with crimson light. She felt the ache of loss, the sting of shame, but also the faint pulse of something undeniable, the knowledge that she had once been truly seen. She knew life would go on. Thomas would build his fences, the children would grow, and her secret would fade into memory. But within her, a scar would remain, not only of betrayal, but of the dangerous beauty of being loved beyond duty. As the family moved forward, Evelyn walked with a quiet resolve. She was both wife and mother, both betrayer and betrayed, carrying a story that would never be spoken aloud. Her grandmother's legacy had been survival. Hers, she realized, would be endurance. And as the desert stretched before her once more, Evelyn whispered silently to herself, sometimes to live is to bear the weight of desire, unfulfilled yet unforgettable.